Hello, my name is Marissa Harrison, and I wrote the book Just as Deadly: The Psychology of Female Serial Killers. So I wrote the book Just as Deadly to summarize and synthesize the research that my team and I have conducted over the last several years. I wanted to present the stories of female serial killers, their motives, their backgrounds, their victim profile, and where I could, the impact on the victims and their families. I tried my best to do that part, the latter part. I thought it was important to write the book to illustrate just how different female serial killers are compared to male serial killers. Um, Society tends to know a lot about, or believe they know a lot about, male serial killers, and female serial killers are just so different. I just wanted the world to know that, they are out there and their crimes may be different, but their crimes are just as deadly as those committed by male perpetrators. I think the book Just as Deadly was important to write, is to get the message out there that women are just as capable as are men of committing violent, heinous, terrible crimes. Um, I wanted also to make sure that there was a scientific point of view out there. Again, Just as Deadly differs from many of the books that I am aware are out there in that, I really put some hardcore science in this book. It's based on empirical evidence. It's based on, I incorporated 1,200 references in the book. I consulted empirical readings in the field of psychology and criminology and physiological science. I also looked at original newspaper reports and court reports and whatever documents, official documents I had access to compile case studies and syntheses, again, based on facts. They're not conjecture. I based what I presented on facts and science and evidence. I think female serial killers have been generally overlooked because, first of all, it's really not that prevalent, right? So serial murder itself is very, very rare, and about 1 out of every 6 serial murderers are females. Okay, so when we don't recognize or recall a female serial killer, I mean, it's statistically improbable that we would encounter one or that such a crime is committed. I also think that, and other authors have said this as well, I also think that gender schema plays a big role in this. So what is a gender schema, right? We have a mental framework of what we think a woman or a man ought to do or ought to be, how they ought to behave. And in terms of gender schema for women, we think women are nurturers and caregivers, maternal, right? And murderer does not fit in with gender schema. So I do believe we are not quick to believe or ready to recognize that a woman is capable of committing these heinous crimes. So I do think those things play into that. Female serial killers do differ from male serial killers in a lot of ways, and one ways is the primary means of murder. For female serial killers, the most common means of murder would be poisoning. For male serial killers, the top means would be, according to our data, asphyxiation. And it's not that some women don't use asphyxiation. It's not that some men don't poison. Both male and female serial killers tend to use different motives, but in terms of the most common, that would be different. Another way that female serial killers differ from male serial killers is the victims they choose. So female serial killers tend to target people they know, even people they're related to, and it tends to be people who are elderly or ill or even children, people who are vulnerable. Male serial killers tend to target strangers. And in another way they're different would be their motives. So female serial killers tend to kill for profit. That's the top motive. Although some do kill for other reasons like power. Male serial killers, the top motive is sexual. There are other motives as well, but those are the top motives. So there are a lot of differences between male and female serial killers. So why is society so fascinated by serial murderers? That's a really great question. And indeed, a lot of people are. I mean, there are even conventions devoted to gathering and learning about murder and viewing artifacts and such. So I do think people are naturally drawn to morbid topics. So let me explain that. Evolutionarily speaking, a morbid curiosity would allow us to take in information that would have allowed us to survive in the ancestral environment. Okay, so I do think there's an evolutionary component to it. I don't want you to think, hey, we evolved to watch documentaries about Ted Bundy. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm saying across time, humans that paid attention to things that could harm us, we pretty much likely left more descendants than humans that didn't do that. So I do think we have a morbid curiosity that we could tie to the larger picture of protective vigilance. So some understanding about harmful topics probably drives us at the unconscious level to seek out, information we think is dangerous or fascinating. Again, there's probably an underlying unconscious motivation for that. So the question is, have I ever met a serial killer? Well, not that I know of. Okay, so I'll leave it like that because there are some serial killers that we just haven't caught yet. I have gotten some interesting communications, and being honest, I do think one of them was from perhaps someone I've talked about in my book. There was some cryptic signals that led me to believe it might be this person. And so I just said, if this person wants to tell me their story, I'm not asking to talk to them. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a trained or licensed interviewer. But hey, I told stories in my book, of course, based on fact. But if somebody wanted to tell me their side of the story, it would be only fair that I listen. So not to my knowledge, and really, I don't want to. But I can't say for sure that I have not. A case of a female serial killer that stands out to me the most. I mean, they all are detailing really horrific crimes that stick with you. I'm going to talk about Belle Gunness, and some of the public probably has heard about her before. She is alleged to have killed around 100 people, they suspect. And Belle Gunness, back in the day, was a farmer, and she put in newspapers in the United States. She put in newspapers what they used to call Lonely Hearts ads. It was like the equivalent of a, eHarmony or something like that. But they put that in the in newspaper ads, advertising for a husband and a partner on her farm. So men would answer her, they would correspond with her, they would bring their life savings with them to her farm in Indiana, thinking that they were going to be in love and in a business, and she would kill them. And as a farmer, she had butchering skills, and so she would kill the men, dismember them, and bury their body parts in her hog pit. And how she was caught, to the best of my knowledge, was one of the men she duped into coming to live with her couldn't find his brother, and he wouldn't take no for an answer, and he came to the farm, and in conjunction with her farmhand, with Belle's farmhand, who knew about what was going on, they actually found his brother's remains in her hog pit, and the police were involved. And I mean, it's memorable because not only did she kill all these men, she killed her own children and faked her death. She hired a housekeeper shortly before she was dead. She beheaded this housekeeper, threw her remains in the house. Belle ripped out her own dental work, threw it by the body, and then burned her house down. And Belle got away. So the fact that she brutally killed people and butchered them and killed her own kids, killed a housekeeper so as to create a body double to convince the world that she was dead, and she got away. So Belle Gunness is one of the cases that stands out the most to me. But I will say Belle is very, very likely deceased by now. That would have been well over 100 years ago. So how many people did Belle kill altogether? They don't really know for sure because they don't know how many people answered those ads that they were unaware of. But when they pulled the remains out of her hog pit, they suspected up to 100 people. But we could include in there, I think it was definitely one, it might have been two of her husbands. So we had 2 or 3 of her kids, we had her stepdaughter. So there were people known to have died. The gentleman's brother we know died, but they suspect due to the remains, probably, well, I think they said well over 30 people, maybe up to 100 people. So horrific on every level. So Just as Deadly, the psychology of female serial killers, I wrote it with the intent that the general audience could pick it up and read it. And whereas I did incorporate science into the book, I did my best with the help of the great editorial team to present scientific phenomena in language that everyday people can understand. So I'm a college professor at Penn State. I've been writing research papers for nearly 25 years. So I'm a science writer. So did my best to take that information and convey it in, take the sciencey language out of the science. And whereas the book is totally presented on evidence, it is geared for the general reader. And I do hope people will pick it up at their local bookstore or order it online. Let me know what you think. So what is the most surprising thing that people will learn from Just as Deadly, the psychology of female serial killers? I believe just how different female serial killers are compared to male serial killers. When we say the term serial killer, we get monstrous images in our brain, we get brutal crimes, we get overt victimization. I think we just have this general notion of what a serial killer is. And I think what would come to mind would automatically be a male serial killer. That's my guess anyway. And again, I do think it is important for people to know that a serial killer, either male or female, but particularly female serial killers, these are people that are around us every day. Again, data show that up to 40%, up to 40% of female serial killers are nurses or nurses' assistants or hospital administrators or even mothers, people who are in the caretaking role and are expected to be nurturing and caregiving and protecting. And then we have people in these roles that are murderers. So I think people are going to be very surprised when they read that. Let me just add this. Almost every nurse or nurse's assistant or hospital administrator or mother that's ever lived throughout the history of time and space doesn't hurt people. They heal people, right? They love people. So it's so uncommon. But to hear of somebody in that role that hurts people, and I think that's what surprises people so much. Somebody who is born to be a caregiver, somebody who trained their whole life to be a caregiver, now harms people. Again, it's an extreme statistical anomaly, but it's surprising to hear nonetheless. In my line of work, so when I present any kind of paper or in the book Just as Deadly, when I talk about serial murder, our job as scientists is to ascertain all the information that's already out there, see what was written already. Science is a body of knowledge. We want to add to that. We want to share that. And I'm always surprised at the lack of empirical research that has been conducted on serial murder in general. I thought there would be a world of research out there, even on male serial killers, and there really isn't. I mean, there's some really great case studies out there, and there are some phenomenal books that contain facts, data-driven facts out there, most definitely. But I do think that from conducting my own research and from summarizing and synthesizing the work for Just as Deadly, it strongly tells me we need more research on this topic. And then what I want to add is this: from writing Just as Deadly and from delving into the different case studies that I did, I am certain we need more mental health help in this world. Again, I'm a research psychologist. I do work in a clinical psychology program at Penn State Harrisburg. And I always have known the importance of mental health practitioners, but now I'm absolutely certain and underscore the need for more mental health practitioners in this world, because many of these individuals suffered from mental illness before they committed their crimes. Now, let me say this. Of course, I feel worse for the victims. I feel terrible for the things that have happened to these individuals. But my thought is, if we can recognize the signs of mental illness early on, maybe we can prevent serial murder, right? And then one more point I'd like to underscore is that from writing Just as Deadly, from the work I've done, from the consults that I've done in the field, I know we need more money for police work and detective work. And I'm talking about the United States, but I'm going to guess that's the case in the UK and everywhere, right? We need to invest in our police and our detective agencies, give them the resources for forensic testing and whatnot, because I guarantee you it's not like it's in reality, it's not like TV, like, okay, send this stuff down to the lab and tomorrow we'll know who it is. We just don't have the money for that kind of thing. So more money for mental health training, more money for our police and our detectives. And I mean, I hope we can prevent, but if we can't prevent, let's at least try to detect. So those were some of my strong take-home points from writing Just as Deadly. I did see a lot of trauma in the backgrounds of people who went on to commit serial murder. Again, it doesn't excuse what they did, but maybe getting people help a little bit earlier, general public help, we can prevent this kind of thing. And I must add this. First of all, people with mental illness are far more likely to be victimized themselves than to hurt anybody else. I want to stress that. And I also want to say that almost anybody who's ever lived, having survived trauma, they don't go on to hurt other people or commit murder or serial murder, right? So people who commit serial murder, it's a statistical anomaly. It does happen, but by studying and recognizing the signs, recognizing the perpetrator, maybe we can stop this from happening in the future.